She gave the fig without thinking, just love, just instinct. He saw it through a dust-slicked window and something in him split. A woman with nothing left but a sick child and mercy. He'd come to buy land. He stayed to rewrite someone's fate. The fig was soft with overripeness, half bruised from the ride back from town, and she meant to save it for tomorrow. But when Micah started coughing again, Eliza Bray peeled it open and fed him with trembling fingers bit by bit. His little lips were cracked from fever. She didn't care. She'd saved it for him anyway. Her last fig, her last anything. Outside, the heat swam against the window panes, a blistering wind dragging dirt like claws across the walls. Inside the shack, there was only the rasp of Micah's breath and the sound of a mother hoping a piece of fruit could do what the doctor in Dry Bend couldn't. Through the warped glass of the front window, a stranger on horseback paused. He hadn't meant to stop. Wasn't the kind of man who did. But something in the moment caught him. The way she cradled the boy close, the tenderness in her fingers, the way she didn't take even a bite for herself. He dismounted without knowing why, tying his reins loosely to a post that looked like it might collapse in the next strong wind. Dust coated his boots. His vest was lined with silver buttons that marked him not as a rancher or lawman, but something else, refined, traveled, out of place. Eliza didn't hear the knock at first. She was humming just barely, something soft and remembered. But when it came again, sharper, she stiffened. She had no neighbors, no friends this far out, only debts and ghosts. Her hands hesitated near Micah's chest, feeling for heat, for breath. Then she rose. She opened the door. The man on the porch didn't look like trouble. But then again, neither had her husband once. He had a look about him, though, worn in the coat but not in the eyes. A man used to money but not afraid of dirt. His gaze went immediately to the boy behind her, then back to Eliza with a strange sort of caution, as if he hadn't expected to be seen as clearly as he was seeing them. "I'm looking for the Bray property," he said. "You found it," she replied. "I was told it was abandoned." She stepped forward just enough to block his view of the inside. "It's not." His eyes flicked to her hands, still sticky with fig juice. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." "You're standing on my porch," she said, not unkindly. He gave a small, almost rueful nod. "I suppose I am." A long silence passed between them. Then he cleared his throat. "Name S. Silas Wren. I'm here on business." She didn't invite him in, but she didn't close the door either. "Business?" she asked. "Land acquisition, surveying for the rail spur." Eliza almost laughed. "There's nothing out here worth acquiring." Silas glanced again at the crumbling fence line, the sagging barn, the cracked water barrel. But his eyes lingered on the fig rind near the hearth, on the child's cough. He said nothing. "You came a long way for disappointment," she said. He didn't answer that, just tipped his hat and stepped off the porch. "If you change your mind, I'll be in town through Friday." She almost let the door shut behind him. "Almost." "Wait," she called. He turned. "You said the land was abandoned. Who told you that?" He hesitated. "County records and a Mr. William Bray." Her heart stopped like someone had poured river water down her spine. William Bray, her husband, or at least the man who'd once been. "He's not here anymore," she said. Silas didn't push further. He only nodded and left. That night Micah's fever broke. It wasn't the fig, she knew that, but it felt like a victory nonetheless, a small one, a mother's kind. She held him long past midnight, rocking gently as the stars blinked like frost through holes in the roof. Her mind returned to Silas, his clothes, his voice, the way he hadn't flinched at the mess of her life. In town, Silas Wren didn't sleep. He sat in the back of the saloon, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring at nothing. He couldn't get the fig out of his mind. The softness of the gesture, the absolute clarity of sacrifice, it gnawed at him. He'd seen poverty before, desperation, even illness, but not that kind of love, not like that, not so quietly heroic. He was a man who bought land, parceled it, sold it for 10 times its value. He'd made his fortune that way, built himself from nothing. But somewhere in him was a boy who'd once sat at a kitchen table and watched his own mother go hungry more nights than not. He hadn't thought of her in years. Not really. Not the way Eliza made him remember. By dawn, he made a decision. It wasn't smart, wasn't even particularly kind, but it felt necessary. He sent a wire to Denver canceling the rail inspection. Then he rode back. When Eliza saw him on the porch again, her first instinct was fear, then anger, then confusion. She didn't open the door this time. "You again," she said through the slat. "I changed my mind." "About what?" "About what's worth saving." The door creaked open. Silas looked tired, not travel tired, soul tired. "I'd like to help," he said, "not because I think you need it, but because I think you deserve it." She stared at him, silent. "Not charity," he added quickly, "investment." She folded her arms. "I don't have anything to offer." He smiled faintly. "You have more than you think." Behind her, Micah coughed again. Silas didn't flinch. "Why?" she asked quietly. He didn't have an answer that made sense, not one he could say out loud, so he said the closest true thing. "Because I saw something in you I don't see in myself, and I don't want to forget it." Eliza didn't invite him in, but she didn't tell him to leave either. By week's end, Silas had a tent staked outside the barn, a ledger on the kitchen table, and a strange sort of peace in his chest. He fixed the fence first, then the well. He taught Nathan how to lay wire, how to split post without cracking the grain. Eliza watched, waited, but every time she expected him to vanish, he stayed. And just when she thought she could begin to trust him, just when the worst of the repairs were nearly done, the sheriff came riding up the lane. He wasn't alone. Beside him, slumped and shackled, was William Bray. The cuffs around William Bray's wrists were streaked with rust and old blood, and his right eye was swollen shut. He didn't look like a man returning home. He looked like a man dragged back through the pit of everything he'd run from. His clothes were torn, dust-crusted. His hat was gone. He shifted in the saddle like the leather chafed his skin, like shame had worn him raw. But the smirk, the one Eliza hadn't seen in nearly 2 years, still clung faintly to his lips. It was thinner now, shaky. But it was there, and the moment their eyes met, it vanished. Eliza didn't move. She stood in the doorway like a statue carved from exhaustion and disbelief, her arms slack at her sides. Micah was asleep behind her, and the sound of his even breath was the only thing that kept her from shattering right there in the dust. Silas stood just behind the porch rail, his hand curled loosely around the post, shoulders squared. He didn't speak. Not yet. Sheriff Godfrey tipped his hat solemn. "Mrs. Bray," he said, "didn't expect to bring you a corpse, so I brought you what was left." Eliza's mouth moved, but no sound came out. "I found him in a busted-up shack south of the basin, hiding out, living off stolen jerky and borrowed time." William chuckled low, spitting blood at his own feet. "Borrowed? Hell, I paid for every mile." Silas's jaw flexed, but still he said nothing. Sheriff Godfrey dismounted slowly, wincing as he hit the ground. "Got some questions, Eliza. Thought you might too. But I'll warn you, this man's been lying so long he's likely forgotten how not to." William looked up. "I ain't lied, I left." And with that, the silence shattered. Eliza's hands clenched into fists without her meaning to. She stepped forward once, just one sharp motion that made both horses shift nervously. "You left me in a house with no food," she said. "You left your son sick and feverish in a cot made of rags. You left me with debt collectors breathing through the walls and a man at the bank who said I should start offering more than polite smiles if I wanted to keep the roof over my head. And now you ride back here and call it a clean break." William blinked slowly, then dropped his gaze. The sheriff's eyes moved between them, steady but not unkind. "He claims the land's still his, says he never signed it over, that you've been squatting." Silas finally moved. "That's a lie." Eliza turned slightly, startled by his voice. Not because it was loud, it wasn't, but because it cut so clearly through the air. She has a deed, Silas continued. Filed it myself in Dry Bend last week. Stamped, sealed, and recorded. Godfrey raised a brow. That's so. William spat again. She forged it. She didn't, Silas said simply. I saw the signature, it's yours. William scoffed. You don't know my damn signature. Silas stepped down from the porch. You signed a power of attorney document with the bank 2 years ago. That file's still in the office downtown. I compared them. William's face turned a dangerous shade of red. The sheriff sighed. Well, that settles that. No, Eliza said softly, it doesn't. They all turned to her. I don't care about the deed, or the bank, or the law right now. She looked at William. I want to know why. Her voice didn't shake, it should have, but it didn't. William opened his mouth. Don't lie, she said sharply, not this time. He closed it again, and for a long moment it seemed he might stay silent, but then his head dropped forward, and he spoke. I thought I was dying, he said. Winter came fast that year. I was coughing blood, couldn't eat. I thought maybe it was consumption, didn't want to waste away in front of you, so I left. Thought I'd find a place to go down quiet. That was 2 winters ago, Eliza said. He didn't look up. I didn't die, he said flatly. But I didn't come back neither. Shame's a heavy thing. It gets heavier the longer you carry it. She didn't reply. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. You want me to take him back into town? There's a warrant out on him, fraud mostly, 1 theft. Eliza didn't answer right away. Her mind was spinning, not with rage, not even with sorrow, just a kind of hollow ache she hadn't expected, a hole where something used to be. I need time, she said. Time don't change charges, the sheriff replied gently. I'm not asking you to lose him, she said, just to leave him here a day. Godfrey gave her a long look, then nodded. I'll be back tomorrow by dusk. He turned to William. Try anything, and I'll drag you to jail by your teeth. William nodded weakly. Wouldn't be the first time. When they rode off, Eliza didn't move for a long time. Neither did William. He stood just beyond the porch, shoulders slumped. Silas remained nearby, his face unreadable. Finally, she stepped aside. Come inside, she said. He flinched like she'd hit him. You sure? No, she said, but I'm tired, and I don't want Micah waking up and seeing you standing out in the yard like a ghost. William followed her in. He moved slowly, like his legs didn't quite remember how to obey. The cabin was too small for avoidance. He lowered himself into the chair by the hearth and stared into the cold ashes like they had something to tell him. Silas lingered at the door. You staying? Eliza asked him. He shook his head. No, I'll check on the livestock. She nodded, thank you. They didn't say goodbye. They never did. Inside, the air felt tight. William shifted uncomfortably. You did good, he said. Better'n I expected. Eliza didn't answer. She was spooning broth into a tin bowl, barely tasting it as she moved. I meant to send a letter, he said. No, you didn't. He fell quiet again. Micah stirred in the back room. Eliza set the bowl down hard enough to rattle. You don't get to speak to him, she said. Not yet. I ain't asking. You're here, that's already too much. He swallowed. You love him like I never could. You were his father. I wasn't built for it. Eliza stared at him for a long time. You weren't built for much, were you? He didn't argue. Outside, Silas ran a hand down the mane of the mare, trying to quiet the storm in his own chest. He hadn't expected it to hit this hard. He didn't know what role he played now. Not the husband, not the sheriff, not even the witness, really. Just a man who'd seen something sacred in a fig and followed it like scripture. By nightfall, the air had grown colder again. The sky hung low, heavy with the threat of a storm. Eliza tucked Micah in, careful not to wake him. When she stepped into the main room, William was dozing. She watched him for a moment. The rise and fall of his chest, the hollow beneath his cheekbones. The way guilt had settled into his bones like frost. She stepped outside. Silas was by the fence line, leaning against the post. "He asleep?" he asked. "No, just pretending." He nodded. "I can sleep in the barn." "You don't have to." "I know." They stood in silence a while. Then Eliza said, "Why are you still here?" He turned to her. "Because I meant it." "Meant what?" "When I said I saw something in you worth staying for." Her throat tightened. She looked away. Inside, William stirred. He was dreaming, badly. His hand twitched against his leg. Outside, the wind began to rise. And somewhere far off, too far to see but not too far to fear, another rider turned off the main road, heading west. The telegram had gone through, and not everyone who'd once done business with William Bray believed he was dead. The stranger rode slow, deliberate, taking the kind of pace that meant he wasn't in a hurry to arrive, just confident he'd be welcome when he did. His horse, a thick-necked roan with scars up both flanks, carried him like a man used to commanding things bigger than beasts. He wore no badge, no brand, but something in the set of his shoulders spoke of authority. Not the kind that serves, but the kind that collects. The telegram had been brief, just a name and a town. But for a man like him, that was enough. William Bray owed him, and debt had a memory stronger than blood. Back at the cabin, the fire was burning low. Eliza sat with her knees pulled up, watching the flames through half-lidded eyes. She hadn't slept. Not truly. Every time she drifted, some sound or memory yanked her back. The creak of the floorboards, the scrape of William shifting in his sleep, the soft, raspy breath of Micah behind the curtain. It all held too much weight. Across the room, William stirred. He wasn't sleeping well either. Every once in a while, he muttered something, half names, half apologies, words that never reached full shape before fading. She didn't wake him, didn't want to hear them spoken clearly. Words from William Bray had always been dangerous once they reached full form. She rose quietly, stepping outside into the cold morning air. The sky was bruised with early gray, the kind of light that made everything feel a little haunted. Silas was already up, perched on the edge of the trough, sleeves rolled, fingers raw from breaking ice. "You don't sleep, do you?" she asked. He didn't look up, not lately. She crossed her arms, squinting at the sky. "Storm coming." "I know." They stood in silence, frost biting at their boots. Finally she asked, "Do you believe him?" Silas glanced over. "William, do you believe what he said, about leaving because he thought he was dying?" He thought for a long time. Then, "I think he tells whatever truth hurts him least." That landed like a stone in her gut, because she knew it was right. She turned to go back in, but Silas said, "He's not your burden anymore. He's still Micah's father." "That's biology, not burden." She didn't answer, just pushed the door open and stepped inside. The warmth hit like a memory, faint, familiar, a little sad. William was awake now, sitting at the table with a mug he hadn't asked for. His eyes were clearer this morning, less swollen, but the hollowness had deepened. He looked like a man who'd seen the edge of the cliff and realized too late he'd already stepped off. "Eliza," he said quietly. She paused, hands resting on the back of a chair. "I know I don't deserve." "Don't," she said. "Don't waste the morning with things we both already know." He shut his mouth. She sat across from him, folding her hands tight. "Sheriff comes tonight. You go back with him." He nodded slowly. "I figured. But before that, you'll do something useful." His brow rose. "You'll take the west pasture and start clearing the bramble. It's choking the wheat roots, and we need that ground." He stared at her like she'd struck him. "You want me to work? You think this is charity?" Her voice was sharp. This land nearly killed me trying to keep it. You'll earn your sleep." He stood stiffly and nodded once. "All right." Outside, Silas watched him stumble toward the brush line with a dull axe. He didn't offer to help. Not yet. Later, when Micah woke, Eliza helped him to the porch where he could sit wrapped in blankets and watch the day unfold. The boy's cheeks were sunken, but his eyes had a spark this morning. A flicker. Silas handed him a carved figure, a bird with outstretched wings. "What is it?" Micah asked. "Hawk," Silas said, "keeps watch." Micah smiled faintly and held it close. By mid-morning, William had cleared a wide swath through the brush. His shirt clung to his back. His hands were blistered, but he kept swinging. Eliza watched from the window, arms crossed. She didn't feel satisfaction exactly, but something colder, something like justice wrapped in fatigue. Silas joined her after a while. "He's working like he's trying to dig his way out of hell." "Maybe he is," she said. They didn't speak again for a long time. But then Micah coughed, hard, sudden, sharp. Eliza was at his side in seconds, lifting him, soothing him. But there was blood now, in the cloth, in the corners of his mouth. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Silas was beside her. "Ride," he said. "Dry Bend, I'll take him." She didn't argue, didn't hesitate. She gathered Micah in her arms and ran for the wagon. Silas loaded water, blankets, anything he could find. William stood frozen in the field, axe dangling at his side, useless. "Eliza," he called. She looked at him once. "You did this," she said. The words didn't even make sense. Not entirely, but they landed with a force that made him stagger. By the time Silas snapped the reins, Eliza was already holding Micah tight against her chest, whispering prayers that had no beginning and no end. Just desperate, looping pleas for time, for mercy, for breath. They made it to Dry Bend by nightfall. The doctor was sober for once, and that alone felt like a miracle. He took Micah without asking questions, his hands sure, his voice calm. Eliza sat in the corner of the little clinic, hands clasped so tight her knuckles had gone white. Silas stood by the door, guarding, waiting. Finally, the doctor emerged. His face told the story before he spoke. "He's stable. Fever broke again, but it's the lungs, deep. Could be weeks before we know." Eliza's whole body sagged with relief and terror, tangled together. "Can I stay?" The doctor nodded. "There's a cot." Silas stayed, too. He didn't ask. He just pulled a stool into the hallway and sat down. Back at the cabin, the sun had sunk low. William sat alone by the hearth, the silence wrapping around him like a noose. He looked at the fig Eliza had left uneaten in a bowl on the shelf. The last fig, maybe. The one she'd chosen for Micah. It sat there, shriveled and soft, untouched. He didn't eat it. He couldn't. And that's when he heard it. Hoofbeats, slow, heavy. He stood and stepped to the door. The man on the roan was close now, close enough to see the shape of him. William's heart stopped. "Boone," he whispered. The rider dismounted with the easy grace of someone who'd ended more lives than he'd counted. He didn't knock, just opened the gate and walked up the steps. "Will," he said, smiling, "you look like something death spit out and couldn't keep down." William swallowed hard. "You got my wire." Boone nodded. "Figured you must have had a good reason to break silence." "I need time." "You don't have it." Boone stepped inside. He didn't ask. Didn't wait. And somewhere in the corner of the cabin, William Bray realized he wasn't the most dangerous man in the room anymore. Boone moved through the cabin like he already owned it. He didn't ask where to sit. He simply pulled out a chair and leaned back, his long legs stretched wide, a pistol still holstered but not remotely out of reach. Everything about him was sharp, his boots polished, his beard trimmed, his coat lined with red silk, like even blood had a place in his wardrobe. William hovered near the hearth, hands clenched at his sides, trying not to tremble. "You're not supposed to be here," William muttered. Boone's smile widened. "That's the thing about debts, Will. They don't vanish just because you run out of paper to write them on. I didn't call you to settle that. No, you called me because you're drowning, and you thought maybe the devil that helped you dig the hole could help you climb out of it." He tilted his head. "You were wrong." William swallowed. "It's different now." Boone looked around the cabin, at the patchwork curtains, the single chipped cup left on the table, the crust of stale bread drying on the sill. "I can see that. Real homey. What's the story here?" William's lips parted, but Boone held up a hand. "No lies, not to me. It was supposed to be abandoned." Boone chuckled, low and sharp. "You and that word, always assuming folks just disappear when you leave M. I signed it over. Not clean, not legal, and not mine." Boone's gaze turned hard. "You owe me $12,000, Will, and not imaginary dollars, real ones, land dollars. You said you'd deliver a stretch from Bitter Hollow to the Ridge, promised clean title. This," he gestured around, "this isn't clean." William stepped back, bumping the shelf. The bowl with the fig toppled, landing soft and soundless in the wash basin. "I'll fix it." Boone rose, slow and deliberate. "You're not fixing anything. You don't even know how." Outside, the wind was beginning to rise. Clouds gathered thick in the east, and with them came the threat of another storm. Boone crossed the room and opened the front door without looking. "This her place?" he asked, squinting into the dusk. William hesitated. "Eliza," Boone continued. "She the one with the kid?" William gave a tight nod. Boone whistled low. "Saw her once, back when you still had a backbone. Pretty, if you like women who look like they've fought hell to stay upright." "Leave her out of it." Boone turned, amused. "Leave her out? You dragged her in the second you put her name on that telegram." "I didn't." "You called me with a lie, and you're still lying. That's your nature, Will. You don't change. You just wear different coats." William's voice cracked. "She has nothing left, please." Boone's eyes narrowed. "Then she's got nothing to lose." He stepped forward, and this time William didn't flinch, he braced. But Boone didn't strike him, just stared at him, disgusted. "You better pray that kid pulls through," he muttered. "Because if he dies and you die and this land gets tangled up in court, I'll be stuck standing in dirt that can't feed even a weed." Then he turned and walked back outside, whistling low as he returned to his horse. He didn't leave, just circled the cabin once, slow, methodical, like he was counting exits. William sagged against the wall, breath shuddering. His legs barely held. Boone was the end of all things. He'd forgotten what it felt like to see him in daylight. Worse than death, worse than jail. Boone didn't collect with bullets, he collected with silence and pressure and ruin. And William had just invited him in. In Dry Bend, Micah's fever crept down again. Not gone, not by a long shot, but lower, quieter, enough that his breathing wasn't scraping the inside of his ribs. He slept through most of the night, curled tight like a question Eliza couldn't answer. Silas watched her. From the corner of the room, from the door, from wherever he thought she wouldn't notice. But she did. She noticed everything now. Her world had shrunk to the size of a boy's bed, and the threadbare hope that tomorrow wouldn't undo what little strength he had left. "I should go back," she said suddenly. Silas didn't move. "It's late." "I don't care. You'll be riding into black." She rose anyway. "Micah's stable. I need to see what William S. done." Silas stood too. "You think he's that much of a threat?" "I think when men like him start remembering who they used to be, they get dangerous." He didn't argue, just went asaddle the horses. They rode out as the moon pulled high, the path ahead lit only by slivers of silver between clouds. The land was brittle and dry beneath their hooves, the kind of terrain that carried sound too well. Every snap of a twig echoed, every gust of wind howled like someone had died. They crested the final ridge just before dawn. And Eliza froze. A fire burned near the barn, small, controlled, but not by William. Boone sat near it, sharpening a blade with slow, meditative movements. William was nowhere in sight. Eliza dismounted and stalked toward the porch, hand tight on the old hunting rifle Silas had handed her an hour earlier. Boone didn't even look up. "Morning," he said. "Who are you?" He smiled without teeth. "Just someone who doesn't like unfinished business." Silas joined her, eyes narrowed. "Where's William?" Boone tossed the knife in the air, caught it, and pointed to the barn. "Sleeping like a baby." "Inside." Boone shrugged. Eliza didn't wait. She pushed past him, yanked the barn doors open. William was there, alive but barely. Bruised, bloody, rope burn on his wrists, tied to a post. "Boone," she shouted. Behind her, Silas raised his gun. Boone didn't flinch. "Not dead," he said. "Didn't touch anything vital yet." Eliza crouched, untying the knots with shaking fingers. William groaned. "You came back." "Of course I did," she muttered. "You're still my mistake." Silas kept his gun raised. "What do you want?" Boone leaned back, hands up like a preacher at the pulpit. "Same thing I always want, my due." Eliza helped William to his feet. He staggered. Silas stepped between them and Boone. "Whatever he owes you," Silas said, "you won't get it from her." Boone's smile faded. "Then I'll get it from someone else. The land, maybe, or the boy if he makes it." Eliza leveled her rifle. And for the first time, Boone went still. "You threaten my son again," she said, voice low, "and I'll bury you in the same soil you're trying to buy." Boone stared at her for a long time. Then slowly, his lips curved again. "I believe you," he said. And he mounted his horse. 2 days, he called back. "That's all he has to find a solution. After that I collect." He vanished into the morning light, like a storm that hadn't decided where to strike next. Eliza helped William into the house, her movements mechanical. She didn't ask if he was hurt. She knew he was. She didn't ask if he deserved it. She knew he did. Silas poured water, bandaged bruises, all while keeping his silence. When William finally lay on the cot, groaning, Eliza sat at the table and stared at the rifle still resting in her lap. "I fed my son a fig," she said quietly. "My last fig, and it felt like enough." Neither man replied. "Now everything's gone sideways because you couldn't leave well enough alone." "I thought you needed saving," William rasped. "I needed quiet," she said. And then she looked at Silas. 2 days. He nodded. "We need to think," she said. But in her heart she already knew. Boone didn't come for land. He came for control. And they just made themselves visible. The first sound was the bell, a long, sharp clang from the west edge of the property line. It rang once, then again. Eliza dropped the basin she'd been carrying, the water spilling across the floor in a cold, wide streak. She knew that bell. It wasn't for supper, it wasn't for guests, it was for danger. Silas had hung it himself a year ago when the wild dogs started tearing through the chicken coop. They agreed 2 rings meant human, 1 meant beast. No rings meant too late. She was already running. Silas met her on the porch, his coat half-buttoned, rifle in hand. Saw someone near the orchard, just one rider, south side. Eliza didn't slow. Boone. Too far to tell. They rounded the barn, boots kicking up hard dirt. The trees had grown thick there, fig and crabapple, with gnarled branches bowing heavy over the fence. Through the gaps in the leaves, a figure approached, slow, unhurried, but not Boone. This man was older, slim. His coat was black and dusty, the collar frayed. He wore a bowler hat low over his eyes and rode a mule that looked just as tired as he did. He didn't raise a hand, didn't wave, just kept moving forward until he reached the broken fence, then stopped. "Name," Silas called. The man didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat, not for a gun but for a letter. He held it up between two fingers, waited. Silas moved first. He stepped through the gate and approached slow, never lowering his rifle. The man handed over the envelope, then turned his mule around and left. No words, no signature, just dust and silence. Eliza took the letter, hands trembling as she broke the wax seal. There was no greeting, no name. You have 2 days. The boy's debt is your own now. Should he survive, he'll inherit it. Should he die, your grief will bury you beside him. Don't mistake kindness for absence. B. She stared at the paper until her vision blurred. Silas didn't speak, didn't try to take it from her. When she finally lowered the letter, her fingers shook. William knew this was coming, she said. Yes. And he brought it to my door. Silas didn't nod, didn't need to. Back inside, William sat with a wet cloth pressed against his temple. He looked worse today, like the bruises had sunk deeper, staining more than just skin. When Eliza walked in, he didn't lift his head. You were supposed to die alone, she said. I tried. You should have tried harder. She dropped the letter in his lap. He read it once, then again, and when he looked up there was no denial in his eyes, just resignation. He always said he'd come for the children next, William muttered. You knew that, she snapped, and you still came back here, still brought that name across the plains like a curse. He nodded. I thought maybe if I gave him something else. There is nothing else, she said, stepping closer. There never was. You don't buy your way out of this. You don't talk your way through. You left me with a sick boy and a sack of dirt, and now you've dragged war to my porch. He said nothing. She turned to Silas. We can't stay. He didn't argue. Where? East, she said. Back through the canyon. I know someone near Red Hollow. Too far, he said gently. Micah's lungs won't hold through the ride. Then we hide. Silas didn't reply, but the tension in his jaw said he hated the plan. The next day passed like a slow death. Eliza packed quietly. She didn't cry. She didn't speak much either, just moved through the cabin like someone laying out shrouds. Micah slept through most of it. His fever hadn't returned, but he wasn't better, just drifting. Silas kept watch from the porch, his rifle never more than an arm's reach. William tried to help once, tried to sweep the floor or stack jars, and Eliza stopped him cold with a single look. You don't get to fix things now. He sat back down. Boone didn't return that day. No riders came, no letters. The silence grew thick. That night Eliza sat by the fire holding the last of the figs in her palm. She hadn't eaten it, couldn't bring herself to. Not after that moment by Micah's cot, that moment of sacrifice. That tiny, stupid fruit had become a symbol now of what she was willing to lose, of what she'd already lost. Silas watched her from across the room. You should sleep, she said. I will when you do. She smiled faintly. You always say that. Because it's always true. Outside, a single owl called once, then silence again. Boone arrived just after dawn. Not with fanfare, not with guns drawn. He rode in like a neighbor coming for coffee, alone, calm, with a ledger tucked under one arm and a thin smile on his lips. Eliza met him in the yard. She hadn't changed. Her hands were still stained with soot from the fire, her hair pulled back rough. Boone dismounted. You got a lovely stretch of land here, he said, almost a shame. She said nothing. He held up the ledger. This is everything William owes, dates, amounts, collateral, and now. He opened it to a blank page and scribbled something, you. He offered her the pen. Eliza stared at it like it was a knife. You sign and I delay the collection for 30 days. Time to get the boy out. Start fresh. You'll owe me the same, but you'll have time. She didn't reach for it. I don't sign things I haven't read, she said. Then read it. She took the book, hand steady, and began to scan. Halfway down the page, she stopped. This clause says if I default, you take not just the land, but my name. Boone nodded. Trademark, you've done good work. People trust Eliza Bray. That name isn't worth anything, she whispered. To you, but to me it's access, trust, favor. You'd be surprised what a name can buy. She closed the book. No, she said. Boone's smile faded. You'd rather lose everything. I already did. She turned and walked back toward the house. He didn't follow. I'll return tomorrow, he called. After that, I stop offering. That night, Eliza sat beside Micah's bed with the fig in her hand again. She thought of selling it, trading it, burying it, but none of those things would matter. So she did the only thing that did. She ate it. Quietly, reverently, like communion. Then she leaned down and kissed her son's forehead. You're not what he wants, she whispered. You're what he fears. She stood and went outside. Silas was on the porch, sharpening his knife. I'm done running, she said. He looked up, then we stand. And William, in the shadows behind them, realized for the first time. He wasn't part of the plan anymore. The sun didn't rise. It seeped, weak and colorless, through the morning mist like it was afraid of what waited below. Eliza stood in the doorway, Micah's blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the trees for motion. Every sound cracked like gunfire. Every shadow stretched too long. The storm that had been brewing wasn't in the sky. It was already here, tucked inside every breath of wind. Behind her, the house creaked. William hadn't left the cot in 2 days. He barely spoke. His wrists still bore Boone's rope marks, but he hadn't complained. There was nothing left in him to defend. Silas returned from the pasture with a lopsided sack of feed and a broken lantern tucked under one arm. His coat was damp, his hat streaked with mud. He looked like he'd slept standing, and in truth, he nearly had. He'll come today, Eliza said. I know. He won't come alone. Silas nodded. She turned to face him. I need you to do something. He waited. If I fall, if anything happens, you take Micah. You go east. You don't stop until you reach the Anderson farm. They owe you. They owe my father. He didn't argue, just nodded once, sharp and sure. They didn't speak of what would happen if Micah didn't make it. That silence was too sacred, too jagged to name. They set to work. By mid-morning, Eliza had buried the last of her keepsakes in a box beneath the roots of the elder fig tree, the only one that still gave fruit. Inside the box was a picture of her mother, a torn ribbon from her wedding dress, and the ledger page Boone had written her name on. She pressed the dirt down hard with both hands, like she could force the past to stay buried. Silas prepared the cabin like a fortress, not with walls but with knowledge. He marked the ground with ash to track footprints, set glass near the windows to catch the sound of boots. He placed the children's toys in a neat row on the porch, something to trip over if men tried to approach too fast. They had no illusions about winning a gunfight, but a few seconds might buy survival. William didn't help. He tried once. He picked up a shovel, walked outside, looked around, and stopped. Something in him had snapped in the barn, and it hadn't mended. He stood in the yard staring at nothing until Eliza walked up, took the shovel from him, and said softly, "Go back inside." "I can still." "No," she said, "you've done enough." And this time he didn't argue. The knock came just after noon. Not a bang, not a fist, just a single deliberate knock. Eliza opened the door. Boone stood there alone, a black coat, no hat, gloves tucked into his belt. Behind him, the trees held their breath. "You didn't sign," he said. "No." He nodded, as if he respected that, even if it meant nothing. "I brought a witness," he said. And from the trees stepped a man in a pale green vest, clean-shaven, holding a pen and a folded ledger. He looked more like a banker than a thug. He didn't speak, just stood off to the side, opening the book. Boone stepped onto the porch. His boots clicked softly. Last chance. You're not here for signatures, Eliza said. You're here for the land. I'm here for the lesson. She stepped aside. Then come inside. He did. The banker remained on the porch, writing. Inside, Boone looked around slowly like he was memorizing the shape of everything. He passed by the hearth, the table, the patch of wall where Micah had drawn a tree in charcoal last spring. He paused near the window, touched the frame. You've kept it up better than I expected. I don't build things to lose them. No, you just inherit other people's mistakes. She crossed her arms. Then tell me why you're really here. He turned. You fed your boy a fig, he said. I saw it. I had nothing else. He tilted his head. You had you. She didn't blink. That's why I came. That's what scared me. Not the land, not the debt. You, he stepped closer. You didn't trade that fig, didn't sell it. You gave it to a dying child like it meant more than gold. That kind of choice, that's dangerous. She stared at him. You think I'm here for revenge, but I'm not. I'm here to end the possibility that you survive. Because if you do, you prove that something stronger than coin exists. And you can't afford that. Exactly. He turned again, slower this time. William's debt is void if he dies. And you never signed, so here's my offer. She waited. You bring him out. You let me finish what I started. You go free. You and the boy and the man outside who thinks I haven't seen his name in the war records. Silas stepped in from the shadows, rifle up. Boone didn't flinch. You don't get to write my ending, Eliza said. I already wrote it. She reached into her coat and pulled something out, small, dull, and wrapped in wax cloth. Boone raised a brow. What's that? Another fig. She peeled it open. It was a deed. Signed, sealed, witnessed. But not to him. Transferred to the church, she said. This morning, with the pastor as executor. If we die, this land becomes sanctuary. If we live, we tend it. Boone's face darkened. You'd give up everything just to keep it out of my hands. I gave up everything a long time ago, she said. Now I protect what's left. The banker stepped forward, alarmed. That's illegal. It's binding, Eliza snapped, as of sunrise today. Boone didn't shout, didn't curse. He simply stepped back, then smiled. Very clever, he said, but you forgot one thing. He turned to the window and whistled. Behind the trees, movement. Riders. 5, then 6. Then more. They weren't bandits, they weren't townsfolk. They were something else, quiet, well-dressed, guns clean, boots polished. Boone's real leverage. We'll see how long sanctuary holds when there's no one left inside to defend it, he said. Eliza raised her rifle. Boone didn't blink. But then, bang, a shot. Not hers. Boone staggered. His shoulder. Blood bloomed across his coat. He turned, shocked. On the porch, William Bray. Standing. Shaking. Holding a smoking pistol. You don't get to write it either, he said. Boone took a step forward, snarling. And then, another shot. From the trees. Boone dropped. The riders scattered. Panic. Chaos. And in the center of it, a figure on horseback. Green coat, wide hat, saddlebags heavy with mail. The merchant. The one who had seen her that day on the roadside, who had seen the fig passed from hand to child, who had not spoken but had remembered. He dismounted slow. Hands raised. I've come to pay the debt, he said. No one moved. Not Boone, slumped and breathing ragged on the porch. Not the riders, frozen at the edge of the clearing, unsure whether to flee or charge. Not Eliza, her rifle still raised, her pulse still hammering in her throat like it might claw its way out. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if nature itself leaned in closer, waiting to see who would fall first. The merchant stepped forward. He looked nothing like the others. No gun, no scowl, no dust-worn coat. His boots were polished, his green jacket still flecked with morning dew. But it was his eyes, gray and unreadable, that held the attention of everyone on that porch. Calm, steady, as if he'd seen worse than this and walked away richer. "I said I've come to pay the debt," he repeated, and this time his voice wasn't loud, but it landed with the weight of a verdict. Boone coughed, blood trailing from the corner of his mouth. "Who the hell are you?" The merchant didn't look at him. He turned to Eliza. "You fed your son with your last fig," he said. "Not because you were certain it would save him, but because you loved him enough to give him your only chance." Eliza didn't lower her rifle. "What do you know about it?" "I was there." Her heart skipped. "You were." "On the ridge, the day you traded nothing for everything." Silas stepped closer, rifle still gripped but not raised. "You were the rider." The merchant nodded. "I was headed west to meet a partner in Deadbridge. I stopped for water. Saw a woman kneeling beside a sick child with a fruit in her palm. You split it. Didn't hesitate. No bargaining, no begging, just sacrifice." He glanced at Boone, then back to Eliza. "And I remembered it." Eliza finally lowered her gun, just slightly. "And now what?" she asked. "You repay me with kindness, with charity." "No," the merchant said. "I repay you with vengeance." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a thin, rolled scroll, wax-sealed, stamped with a mark Eliza didn't recognize. "Boone doesn't own the debt anymore." Boone tried to rise, but William leveled the pistol again. "Don't," he warned. His voice shook, but the aim didn't. The merchant approached the porch, unfolded the scroll, and handed it to Eliza. "Transfer of lien. Every cent William owed, bought this morning, in my name." She blinked. "Why would you?" "Because I saw something worth more than interest." Boone hissed. "You think you can erase me?" "No," the merchant said, crouching beside him. "I don't erase, I invest." Then he turned his back on Boone and faced the porch. "Silas," he said, "I know your name too. You served with my brother in the 3rd. He spoke of you before he died. Said you held the line when no one else would." Silas said nothing, but his grip on the rifle eased. "And William Bray," the merchant continued, "you don't deserve mercy, but you deserve a chance to fix what you broke." William didn't speak. He couldn't. His lips parted, but no sound came, just tears. "Then take it," Eliza said coldly. "Fix it." The merchant raised a brow. "He won't do it alone." She didn't flinch. "He won't do it at all unless I say so." For a long beat, they stood in that moment. 3 people caught between ruin and redemption, and one man bleeding at their feet who had once thought himself invincible. The merchant finally turned to the riders at the edge of the trees. "Go home," he said. One of them stepped forward, clearly the second in command. "We were paid." The merchant held up a gloved hand. "You've been released. The debt's been bought. Unless you came here for murder, your job is done." Another pause. Then the man nodded once, a curt soldier's nod, and slowly, one by one, the riders turned and disappeared into the trees. No chaos, no bullets, just silence and dust. Boone growled, "You think this ends me? I've survived worse." "No," the merchant said. "You thrived on worse, but you won't survive without control, and today you lost it." He straightened. Eliza crossed to the edge of the porch and dropped Boone's ledger at his feet. "Take it," she said. "Take it and go." Boone looked up at her. Rage and humiliation tangled in his throat like barbed wire. "I should kill you," he spat. "But you won't," she replied. "Why not?" She smiled, tired and worn and fierce. Because if you were capable of doing it yourself, you wouldn't have brought an army. She turned away, back into the cabin. And Boone, for the first time in a long life full of power and fear and fire, didn't follow. Micah stirred that night. His eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first. His lips parted with a dry rasp, but the sound was real, present, alive. Eliza dropped to her knees beside him, pressing a damp cloth to his cheeks, whispering his name like a prayer and a memory all in one. "Mama," he croaked. "I'm here," she said, voice cracking. "I'm here." And then she laughed, or sobbed, or both. It didn't matter. What mattered was his hand curling weakly around her finger. What mattered was that he lived. Selah stood in the doorway and didn't speak, just watched, just let the moment be. William sat in the shadows of the room, still bleeding, still broken, but for the first time he didn't look hollow, he looked ready. By morning Boone was gone, no blood trail, no threat, just absence, like he'd been erased not by fire but by the sheer force of being forgotten. The merchant stayed. He didn't speak much, didn't linger too long in the room, but he helped repair the barn wall. He retied the fencing that had snapped under hooves. He rode into town and returned with sacks of flour, bundles of nails, a fresh coat for Selah's, and 3 loaves of bread that smelled like forgiveness. He never asked for thanks, never offered excuses. Eliza watched him the way one watches a storm long after it's passed, wary but grateful for the rain. On the 5th morning, she found him near the orchard, staring at the elder fig tree. "You're leaving," she said. He nodded. "Where will you go?" "Where I'm needed." "And what do I owe you?" He turned, and for the first time she saw something shift in his face. Not pity, not admiration, but something closer to reverence. "You already paid," he said. "You gave your child your last fig." She looked down. "I would have given him more." "I know." He mounted his horse. The sky above was clear, the horizon golden with sun. "Eliza," he said. "Yes." He hesitated. Then, "If ever the world forgets what it means to be decent, remind them." She nodded. And then he was gone. Selah's returned to the fields. William stayed. He worked in silence, never complaining, never resting more than a few hours. He repaired the chimney, painted the front door, dug new irrigation lines for the orchard, and every day Micah grew stronger. By the end of the 2nd week, the boy was walking again, weak but upright. One evening, Eliza gave him the last pit from the fig she'd eaten. It was dry and hard, more stone than seed. But she helped him plant it anyway, beside the elder tree, where the dirt was soft and the roots were strong. "What'll it grow?" Micah asked. "Hope," she said. He didn't ask more. The cabin stood, the orchard grew. And Eliza Cooper, once a widow with nothing but a sick child and a single fig, became something else. Not a legend, not a martyr. A root. A seed. A story planted deep in the soil, waiting to bloom again when the world grew too dry to remember how to be kind. Spring arrived without ceremony. No fireworks, no sudden warmth, just the quiet creeping of green where brown had ruled too long. Grass thickened around the orchard roots. Rain came steady for a week straight and left the air heavy with promise. The sky stayed pale most days, like it, too, was beginning to breathe again. Eliza stood barefoot in the yard one morning, hem soaked, eyes closed, arms folded loosely across her chest as the breeze lifted her hair and the world remembered how to live. Micah's laughter floated from behind the barn. Not just laughter, chasing feet, wooden swordplay, Selah's pretending to lose again, tumbling backward into hay with exaggerated groans. Micah was nearly himself again. His walk had steadied. The coughs were rarer now, his cheeks flushed with health rather than fever. The fig tree they'd planted together still looked like a twig jammed into earth, but he watered it daily like it were his own kin, speaking to it softly the way Eliza once spoke to him when he was too weak to sit up. William stood by the fence, sleeves rolled, hands blistered from honest labor. He didn't speak unless spoken to, didn't eat unless invited. He slept in the barn most nights, not because he was unwelcome, but because he understood penance meant choosing discomfort even when comfort was offered. Sometimes Eliza watched him when he wasn't looking, saw the slump in his shoulders, the way he stared at the sky like it owed him something he'd never be brave enough to name. She hadn't forgiven him. But she no longer dreamed of his absence. The merchant had not returned. Not in letters, not in person, not even a rumor to track him by. He'd vanished the way dust does in morning light, present and then gone, leaving only the warmth of something swept clean behind. Still, when Micah asked if he'd ever come back, Eliza didn't say no. She just said maybe. Because men like that didn't belong to anyone. They were wind, fire, debt paid in full and nothing left to claim. Selah stayed. Not because she asked him to, but because when he rose one morning and saddled his horse, ready to go, Micah stood in the doorway and said, "You forgot breakfast." And Silas, who had once walked away from battalions and blood without blinking, found himself staying for eggs and burnt toast and the sound of a boy's voice calling him friend. They rebuilt the coop, grew corn, bartered eggs for flour with the Andersons until they could afford to send Silas into town once a month for supplies. And always the orchard. The figs returned slower this year, fewer in number but fuller in taste, as if the roots had learned hunger and wanted no child under that roof to know it again. By midsummer, word of Boone's downfall began to ripple westward. Stories twisted and tangled along the road. Some said he'd been killed outright. Others claimed he'd ridden into the mountains mad with fury, swearing vengeance on anyone who dared plant fig trees. But no one saw him again. His ledgers stopped circulating. His men disappeared into riverside towns and took up quieter work. His name, once spoken like law, became a ghost in saloon corners, just another cautionary tale in a land that punished greed when it outgrew sense. What people remembered instead was the woman who didn't break. They came in trickles at first, a widow with a burnt cartwheel, a man with 3 children and no place to sleep, a girl who'd fled a marriage broker and walked 20 miles with blisters between every toe. Eliza never turned anyone away. She couldn't always offer much, sometimes just a cot in the barn or a bowl of soup, but she offered it without question. Silas built more cots. William gathered herbs. Micah shared his figs. One morning a stranger arrived. Old, thin, bent from travel. He carried no bags, just a folded handkerchief and a torn scrap of paper in his coat pocket with the name Eliza Cooper written in a child's hand. "I'm looking for a woman who feeds people," he said. Eliza, bent over her wash, looked up and simply said, "You found her." He stayed 3 nights, slept without fear, left a coin pouch behind that no one touched for a week because it felt too sacred to spend. And when Silas finally opened it, there was more than gold. There was another scrap of paper. "Kindness isn't a debt, but it pays back all the same. M." They didn't speak of it. But the merchant's shadow stayed. Years passed. The orchard thickened. The twig Micah planted grew tall, its roots strong. The figs it bore were darker than the others, so dark they almost looked black in sunlight, but sweeter than any fruit Eliza had ever tasted. Micah named it Hope, and the name stuck. Travelers passing through asked for it by name. "One of the Hope figs," they'd say, "the ones that cured the boy." Rumors twisted truth into legend, as rumors do, but no one at the homestead ever corrected them. William died the way a man hopes to: quiet, working, forgiven. Not with grand apologies, but with actions. A rebuilt well, a new coop, every broken chair mended. Micah sat by his bed in those final hours, holding his hand, and Eliza stood in the doorway, tears drying on her sleeves. When they buried him under the tallest tree, Micah placed 3 dried figs at the base and whispered, "This time you gave us everything." Silas never left. He built a room off the back of the house and filled it with tools and maps and letters he never sent. He taught Micah how to shoot, how to fix a saddle, how to listen when a horse whinnied wrong. When the boy turned 16, Silas handed him a rifle that had seen more battles than birthdays and said, "You carry this, not for fear, but for choice." Eliza aged without ever truly growing old. Her hands grew rough, her back stiff, but her eyes stayed bright. Children who passed through the home, and there were many, called her Mama Cooper. Some stayed a month, some stayed years, but all of them left stronger than they arrived. And every last one took a fig with them when they went, wrapped in paper, kissed on the forehead, and sent out into the world with a story stitched into their spine. The orchard became a landmark. Not a business, not a church, just a place people whispered about when they said things like, "There's good still left," or "You'll find help at the fig trees." And somewhere out there, always just ahead of the stories, the merchant walked on. Green coat, pale eyes, saddle heavy with coin and questions. No destination, just direction, toward suffering, toward need, toward whatever fire threatened to swallow the last fig from a mother's hand. One day, Micah returned from town with a book. Not a ledger. A journal. He handed it to Eliza with dirt still on his boots. "I think we should write it down," he said. She blinked. "What?" "All of it, the fig, the merchant, you." She laughed softly. "What good would it do?" He shrugged. "The same good the tree does." He didn't explain further. And so she wrote. Not with flowery words or grand titles, but with truth. Page by page, night by night, she wrote about hunger, about watching your child drift into fever, about giving what you can't afford to lose and being surprised when it saves not just him, but everyone. She wrote about Silas's quiet loyalty, William's late redemption, the merchant who never came back, and the fig tree that outlasted them all. She titled it simply, "The Last Fig." And Micah made sure every child who left the orchard took two things with them: a wrapped fig in their pocket and a page from her journal in their pack. It wasn't just food. It was a seed. Of mercy. Of memory. Of proof that somewhere once, a woman with nothing gave everything and changed everything. And though time passed and names faded, the story never did. Because kindness, once planted, never truly dies. It bears fruit. Even in famine. Even in fear. Especially then.